All right. Want to go over a few quick announcements before we get into our sermon time today. We've got a lot of things on the horizon, not our typical things that we have year-round, as you could probably imagine. We are moving, as you all know. This is one of the things that we want to continue to connect with Chris. She's going to be heading upstairs with Kids Zone today, but as she's going to be facilitating, she's like the go person. And so as far as coordinating the ministries as they're packing and organizing, just continue to connect with her, your ministry leaders, as you are continuing to work on ministry areas. I'm helping, making sure we got to, Josh, Sue, and I were working on the youth ministry not too long ago. When we pulled everything out, we're like, all right, well, here it all is. And so now we got to get to the next step of like, all right, now what do we do with everything? So it's going to be a process. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, talk to Chris, talk to me, talk to Pastor Josh, let us know. Just continue to communicate if there's any confusion or any worries, concerns, just because we want that process to go as smoothly. I know it feels like time is moving pretty fast. So I want to go ahead and put this on your radar too. We have our first Sunday service coming up as well on August 10th in our new space, 525 Arapahoe. The space we'll be renting out from not from Loft City Church, but where Loft City Church is going to be moving from. So they'll be moving, as you all know. I'm talking like we're live streaming right now. We're not. As our two churches are going to be moving this summer, our first Sunday service is going to be August 10th. Theirs is going to be August 3rd over in the sanctuary. We've got a lot to look forward to on August 10th. Just a big celebration Sunday. We've got our pastor ordination ceremony, as we're going to be sending off Pastor Josh that day, sending him off to his next chapter in Minnesota. We've got our kids promotion Sunday that day as well. As we're going to be, that's always something that we do each year as we celebrate the kids that are moving up from Kids Zone to youth ministry. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We always make that kind of a fun day too. We always have like the graduation celebration for the youth in May, and then we have kids promotion Sunday in August as that's like their first Sunday getting up to go join the youth, and that's always exciting for them. So we'll be celebrating all of that together, and just the fact that it's our first official Sunday service in the new space where we'll be in for the next year. And so with that, we've got also our mission trip to Costa Rica coming up pretty soon. We've got our team that's kind of forming. Got a few guys. We got Josh, Carol, Josh, Sue, and I think James too. I think he went upstairs this morning as well. He's upstairs. Okay, cool. Pray for them as they're getting ready to travel to Costa Rica. With all the opportunities that are there for teaching with EBOC, and for building connections with the church in Santa Rosa. Y'all, one of the things that we talked about when we got back from Costa Rica is the really interesting way in which in Costa Rican culture, as far as evangelical churches go, they don't really work together very much. So the kind of partnership that you see where you have sister churches, like we're blessed to have Loft City Church and Impact Church and other churches that we've been able to kind of talk to and have a kind of fellowship with. They just don't have that there. And when they do, it's usually there's networks that you can pay dues for, but if you're a small church that doesn't have a lot of resources, or you're just kind of getting started or just getting organized, whatever stage you're in, and you're not able to kind of make that kind of commitment, you're kind of just on your own. And so even just having a church that we can pray over and just love on them and say, just, hey, how are you doing? Is just a really neat opportunity. And so let's just be in prayer for Pastor Josh and Josh Sue, the two Joshes, and for James as they're going to be traveling up and just continuing to kind of build those inroads for mission opportunities for us as a church. And also, let's see, I want to point out some work days that are coming up because I think there maybe have been some kind of questions about this. So we've got a couple work days coming around the corner in, August. Actually, end of July, beginning of August. So you'll see at the bottom is our August 10th service right there. It's just the same announcement, a little bit of a description of kind of what to expect for that day. July 27th and August 3rd. I want to get to that July 13th. I'm actually going in reverse order because I kind of am going from our service to those 2 Sundays leading up to it. We've got our July 27th service and our August 3rd service are both going to be pretty similar. Those are going to be work days in our new space. Come dressed, ready to move things around those 2 Sundays. We are still going to have a kind of a short devotional service. We might have a song or two. We'll work with the worship team and just kind of see what that looks like. On the 27th, actually, I forgot to mention this and to include it in the slide here, but we're actually going to have a visit from one of the missionaries that we support, Jeff Butler. And yeah, is it okay if I name just, I don't know why. Is it okay if I say his name? I don't know why I'm asking. Yeah, Jeff Butler is going to be coming to visit us that Sunday morning. And he does mission work and just some really cool stuff. And so we're going to have an opportunity to hear from him. He comes and visits us about once a year. And he does some really neat stuff that he's been doing for several years. And so trying to think what else. The July 13th service, yes. So on July 13th, we're going to have our Ethnos members business meeting. Just wanted to put that on your radar because that's something that we need to make sure that you're aware of well in advance. And so this is your notice for church members. If you're not a member, you're still welcome to attend. We're not going to kick you out, but we're going to have that. We usually do it during coffee break. And we're basically going to be voting to approve church budget. Just really kind of important things that we're going to be addressing that particular Sunday. Like, I mean, no big surprises, just a business Ethnos family meeting. The last thing that I want to get to, it's not on our slides, but I wanted to go ahead and name this because it's something, it's become official. It's not uncommon knowledge at this point, but it's something that I wanted to celebrate with you all, is that as Josh rolled out the plan for beginning of July, I'll be starting full-time. And the first thing that I'll be doing is facilitating the church move. And so I'll be working with Chris on everything church move related. And so whether that's signage, I mean, just like all the things. And so I'll be coordinating with her full time. That starts July 1st, so this week. So you'll notice that it's a little bit of a change this morning because I'm starting a 4-part sermon series. And that means that my capacity is changing for worship ministry. And so we're starting a little bit of that transition for me to kind of step off. And part of that transition is that Victoria is going to be the new worship coordinator director. And will also be starting July 15th. She'll be working part-time for our church as administrative. Help me remember the exact title. Wow, see, there it is. She remembers it. She's like ready with it. Yes, so she'll be our administrative executive assistant as well as coordinating our worship team. The things that I've been doing as far as each week, coordinating just the behind the scenes, getting everything ready, because the intention was never that this is the Ryan show. This is always a team kind of thing, but we do still need someone coordinating, and that is going to be Victoria now. And so we kind of got into this week and we're like, oh, I guess it's time. Without kind of realizing like, oh, starting a sermon series, it's time. And so we're very, very thankful for Victoria, and just want to give her a round of applause. Just very thankful for the heart that she has for the ministry that she's already been involved in and being a part of leading our worship team, and that she's going to continue to do that. I'm personally very, very excited and just very proud of the way that she's grown over the last couple of years, and just to see how being on the worship team has just been so life-giving, and to watch her grow in confidence was just a lot of fun to get to watch you and the whole worship team lead. It was a little bit sad that I wasn't up on stage with you all, but I was very, very thankful, and I'm like, this is a really cool moment, so very happy for you. All right, I don't have a clicker, so do you just want me to like signal you, Adam, whenever I need the slide changed or something? Cool, I'll do that. Want to go ahead and get started with our message today. We are going to be starting a 4-part mini sermon series for the next few weeks on the book of Joshua. And something that, as I was preparing for this sermon series, I was trying to decide exactly what it was that I wanted to do. If I wanted to do something more topical, if I wanted to walk through a whole book of the Bible. We've got a lot of like shorter kind of epistles, the letters in the New Testament. Or if I wanted to kind of walk through a few kind of consecutive passages or jump around, one of those things that I was praying about. And I'll be very honest with y'all, the more that I thought about just the topics, if I were to do topical for a sermon series, where are we at and what is the topics that I'm feeling kind of impressed upon me? And the more I thought about it and prayed about it, just the book of Joshua, several topics just kept coming up from the book of Joshua. So talking with Pastor Josh about it and praying over it and reading through it, refamiliarizing myself with the book and the context, I was just blown away with how much of the particular moment that the people of God, the Israelites in the book of Joshua, are stepping into this moment that we can, as readers, look and see how God is interacting with his people then and what it means for us today. And I just got more and more excited to walk through this particular book. So for the next few weeks, we'll be spending time going through the first few books or few chapters of the book of Joshua. We'll be going up through about the Battle of Jericho, and so this kind of like build up. The book of Joshua is filled with contrasts too. So we might kind of see there's another significant battle that happens after Jericho too. So if we're able to kind of get to that, we'll see if we're able to kind of fit that into the sermon series as well. But we've got these 4 weeks going through Joshua, and so I want to start today off by just asking just a couple of questions to kind of prime us for today's topic. And I want to ask, as I was asking reading through this passage, what does it look like for us as a community of God's people to have courage? What does it look like for us to continue to advance his kingdom in the midst of dramatic changes of a physical move and of a leadership transition? What does it mean for us to have courage? What does it mean for us to have stability in God's presence and who he is? And to have confidence in his plan? Those are just some simple questions that I've had going into this passage and how that affects us in our daily lives. So for us as a church community and us as we go out to the places where we live, where we work, where we play, what does our testimony look like? Because we have a lot of things going on in our church family. And so there's a lot that as you're going through the book of Joshua will feel a little bit on the nose because there's so much here. You read commentaries and they're like, if you're going through like leadership or you have questions about leadership, succession, like this is a book that you want to read. I'm like, okay, well, this is a great book then. And I want to make 4 stops as we're going through the first 2 chapters of Joshua today. The first is over God's promise. We're going to look at God's promise to his people and how he shows his faithfulness. The second is about what he expects of his people as they're leaning into his faithfulness and his promise. The third is what that looks like in turn for the community to be facing towards each other. And fourth, what that means to be invitational to the rest of the world. And what I mean by that is having the same missional approach that God's kingdom has always had. That when we go into a space, we're not there to be comfortable, but we're there to engage culture. We're there to engage people who believe differently from us, who've come up in different backgrounds, different cultures. What does it look like to engage with them? And what has God's plan been for the outsider? So with that, I want to take us to our passage for this morning. We're going to get started at the very beginning of the book of Joshua in chapter 1, verse 1. I'll be reading from the NLT, and you'll notice there's going to be like the Yod-He-Vav-He, the YHWH, instead of the Lord. Just kind of change those out, because anytime you see, you may know this, capital letters for Lord, L-O-R-D, that's just the place for God's proper name, Yahweh. And so all I've done is kind of swapped those out there. And so that's the only kind of thing that you may see different if you're reading from the same translation there. But I'll go ahead and start reading for us. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to, and see, I was already reading the Lord. The Yahweh's servant, Yahweh spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I am giving them. I promise you what I promised to Moses. Wherever you set your foot, you will be on land I have given you, from the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail or abandon you. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. If you were to look back at the end of Deuteronomy, you would see the beginning of what we just read as a transition to Joshua's leadership. Because at the end of Deuteronomy, we see the end of Moses' story in the Old Testament, in the Bible. And as the chapter of Moses closes, we see this succession that shifts focus from Moses, who's been leading God's people out of Egypt ever since Exodus, all the way through Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. And at the very end of Deuteronomy, now we have the death of Moses. And what does this mean for the people of God, for the people of Israel? And as Joshua is named at the end of Deuteronomy, we don't see a change in leadership until we get to the beginning of Joshua. And from the get-go, we see a very rapid transition. Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people. That is as immediate as you can get. And the thing that Yahweh tells Joshua from the beginning, that God affirms, is I will be with you. As I promised to Moses, so I promise to you. I am with you. And more significant than this promise of land provision, which is this movement part of this promise, is that God's presence is going with them. So what does this mean for the people of Israel that are getting to go into this land? Oh, what's the importance of land in the first place? Well, to take you back all the way to Genesis, we're not going to flip all the way through our Bible, so don't worry. But just to kind of give you sort of a snapshot, quick review, Genesis to where we are, is in the beginning of Genesis, you see the way that God has created the world. We see that man and woman are created in God's image, are made to bear his image uniquely among all creation until we mess it up. Sin enters the world, and from there, just chaos ensues throughout the rest of Genesis. Frankly, I don't know about y'all, but every time I go through the book of Genesis, it kind of drags me down a bit because it's a dark read. From the time that sin enters the world, the bad news just keeps getting worse as there's violence, as there's destruction, as there's sexual immorality. There's all kinds of things as God has to wipe the face of the earth clean because he is grieved over the depravity that's happening in the world, and it doesn't ever seem to really get better. So in the midst of this, God calls this one person out of the land of Ur, Abram, and he says, I'm going to make a nation out of you. Now keep in mind the context of what's going on in these days. These are days in which survival was not taken for granted. Pretty separated from where we live today. You know, today we can come in this morning and we can enjoy coffee and air conditioning when we come and we sit, and we can enjoy worship together. Whereas in this particular context, survival was a really big deal. Your family was everything. You belonging to a group of people was a matter of life and death. And so being a part of something bigger than yourself in which you were able to ensure your own protection, you were able to ensure your own lineage and pass on an inheritance, those are ways in which you were thriving. And so God calls Abram out of Ur and says, I'm going to make a nation out of you, but I'm going to do it in covenant with you. You're going to be the people that I'm going to raise a nation out of you. You're going to be my people, and I will be your God. If that's the covenant and relationship that you want to enter into, I want you to be a light and a blessing to the rest of the world. And so we begin to see that unfold through the patriarchs as God keeps his promise, as we start to kind of see this sort of gradual shift of what he's doing in the lives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then through slavery in Egypt, where we see almost this pause of 400 years of, okay, well, we're supposed to be a great nation. What happens? And God sends Moses, and Moses comes and he delivers them from the hand of Pharaoh. They wander in the wilderness. And that takes us through Exodus, which is all about this deliverance. God's people are out of Egypt. Now they're going to go and they're going to experience God's promise to be a nation. And so they go to Sinai, and God starts creating and rooting their identity in who he is and starts explaining what it is to be my people. And throughout the book of Leviticus, we see all the different law codes and regulations, standard for worship in Yahweh's presence as he resides in their midst. Going through Numbers is really interesting because we kind of tend to think that it's this really boring census book, and it's really not. There's some very crucial historical things that happen as the people of Israel are wandering in the desert for those 40 years leading up to the book of Joshua. And as that generation is shifting, we find ourselves in the book of Deuteronomy, which is the second law, as Moses is re-giving the law to the new generation, saying, this is who you are to be as Yahweh's people. As you're going into the new land, this is how you are supposed to look. This is the relationship with Yahweh and what it's supposed to look like. These are the expectations. And it's in this book that we see the Shema, which we talk about a lot. And that brings us to Joshua. Who is Joshua? Well, Joshua was born to the name Hoshea in Egypt during Israelite slavery to the tribe of Ephraim. His name was changed to Yehoshua, which is Yahweh is salvation, by Moses. And so you see this interesting shift where even Joshua himself, as Israel is beginning to have its identity rooted in who God is by virtue of its name taken from Jacob, we now see even Joshua, who is eventually to be the successor of Moses, is even his name is being rooted in who God is. That whereas Hoshea means just general salvation and deliverance, his name now means Yahweh is salvation. He was a military commander against the Amalekites. This guy is a warrior. He's not a meek, timid little guy. He's Moses' assistant. And he's also one of the 12 spies sent to Canaan. And you may remember this story, that only he and Caleb urged trust in God's promise to give them the land. And so we see in this particular story as literally, as God is bringing fulfillment to you, I'm bringing you to the promised land. They get to the border and the Israelites say, we want to send some spies over. And so they send 12 spies over, and 10 come back with a report saying, these people are giants and we can't take this. We don't want it. And the people freak out. We don't want any part of this. Why'd you bring us out here in the wilderness to die? We were better off back in Egypt. They were ready to stone the 2 other spies who came back with a report saying, like, no, the fruit here is good. This is land that God has given us and promised to us. And the people reject it. And so God honors their rejection and allows them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And y'all, I don't remember where I heard the statistic, but the amount of people in a generation who passed away in the matter of 40 years was a tremendous, there had to be like dozens of burials every day kind of turnover just in 40 years what this looked like. But God honored their decision to not go into the promised land and not to bring fulfillment to what he was bringing to them. And the irony of this spy mission is that the very thing that these 10 spies were saying and that the people were rejecting, like, nope, we can't go there, we don't have any part of that, is because the people were large. They looked like giants. Because again, in those days, to be well-fed and well-nourished, you were bigger, you were stronger, stockier. Literally, these people are so well-nourished from the land that God is promising to take them to and to give to them that they're like, nope, we don't want the land. They can have it. So I want to land this plane on why the land. And I want to show you something, this map right here. Now we'll just kind of go through this quickly. This is what the land of Canaan would have looked like prior to the conquest of Joshua. That's it kind of on the left, just to give you a sense of the different people groups and kingdoms and that were there at the time. And on the right is kind of like a little bit of a blown up picture. You can see the River Jordan there, and Jericho is a little dot just above the Dead Sea there. And so right above that spot is where you're going to see Jericho, that when they cross the River Jordan in a few chapters, that's where they are. But let's look at this next image here. And this isn't a marked map at all, but I want to give us a sense of location as far as the significance of the people of Israel getting to inherit this particular land. Why God is giving the nation of Israel land in the first place. Now you look right there on the far right edge of the Mediterranean Sea, that's the land of Canaan. That's where modern day Israel is today. And I want you to notice, having taken off kind of all markings, all nation borders, everything that's kind of, as this map has changed, empires, everything's kind of taken off. The thing that you may notice is that this is in the midst of 3 massive continents. So for God, who is wanting a nation to represent him and to have influence on the world, do you think that he would place them in the far corners of the wilderness and the mountains where they're safe, where they can just grow in their numbers? They worship Yahweh over here on the corner of the world. These are Yahweh's people over here. They don't really interact with anybody, but here they are. God puts them right in the center. And it's well known, too, and documented that particularly in the age right before the conquest of Joshua and even after, that there were major trade routes if you wanted to be connected with the rest of the world in commerce and influence. That particular area in Canaan is where you wanted to be. So for a God who wants to display his kingdom agenda, to model his wisdom, his justice to the rest of the world, he wants to place his people there. Not so that they can go and be comfortable, but that they can go live there for him. Let's look at this verse 2. Back in Exodus. Now, if you will obey me and keep my covenant, you will be my own special treasure from among all the peoples on earth. For all the earth belongs to me, and you will be my kingdom of priests, my holy nation. I think about the image of the tabernacle in the middle of the Israelite camp, too. Because it wasn't placed over on the edge of camp. It was placed right in the middle of camp. As God's presence is dwelling in the midst of the holy of holies and the holy place out from there, and then you have the courtyard, and then you have the camp. God being in the middle there, and the priests that are representing his people, and his people to him. As a kingdom of priests, this is where he wants his people to be. It's not just so that they can be a big, powerful nation in and of themselves. That's not his promise to Abraham. His promise is to enter into a covenant that you will be my people and I will be your God, and that you will be a blessing to all the nations. And this is how we see just the beauty of what it means for our embodied presence to have impact. Because if you think about the way that God created us in his image, we're physical beings, we're ensouled bodies, that when we enter the room, there's an impact that we have. When I enter the room, when Jordan enters the room, there's an impact. The room shifts a bit as people, you can see, you can hear, we're people, we smell sometimes, and I probably smell worse than you. I don't think you smell. But there's ways in which we as ensouled physical beings have an impact on the space that we enter into. And so when we talk about embodied presence, this is what we mean. That as physical beings, as God's people in particular, these are the types of spaces that God calls us into to impact. And it's not for our own sake. It's for the sake of his kingdom, his purposes, his presence. And God gives a charge to Joshua. He says, Chazak v'chamatz. Chazak v'chamatz. Be strong and of good courage. Now we see this, a lot of us may be familiar with this particular passage. We may have seen this on cross-stitchings, on tattoos. But there's something very important to know about what is being said here, because we're going to see all the different times, and so I don't want to park on it just yet, but suffice it to say at the moment that this sense of the Hebrew be strong and courageous, it's almost this double be strong and of good strength, but it's kind of understood as this second word is courage, strength. Now, oftentimes, there's a couple different ways you can render that courageous word. You can render it in a causative sense. I cause someone to be strengthened. I cause someone to be uplifted. This particular sense is a little bit different. It's not the causative sense, but this kind of word for courage, for strength here in this sense, is used in the context of being sustained in God's presence and who he is. It's not a self-generated courage. And we'll talk more about that. But God promises power and presence with their possession of the land. And Joshua's courage is based on God's presence. And we spent the last several weeks with Josh preaching on faith without fear. And we had Josh Sue last week talking about a kingdom perspective on our earthly circumstances. What does that look like? And so that's where we're going with this particular sermon series, is what does it look like? We talked about how God calls us into relationship with him. We talked about how the disciples in the boat having this impending fear, and Jesus is able to sleep because he has such relational connection with the Father. It's intimate that it's, why question if we're going to be okay or not? He knows. Not just because of who he is as Jesus, but because of the confidence that he has in God's plan and who God is. And that's what fuels this kind of courage that we see in Joshua. Isn't it cool how things span from Old Testament and New Testament? It's like the same God is kind of behind the scenes the whole time. It's interesting. But all this leads us to this principle, that God is faithful in his promises of his presence to his people. God is faithful in his promises of his presence to his people. I want to read our next passage, so look with me, if you will, at Joshua chapter 1 again. We'll look at verse 7. We'll read 7 to 9. And here it is again. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night, so you will be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. Study this. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So Yahweh's expectation for his word to be followed is something that's paramount here, as he's not only reaffirming his promise to his people in the beginning, he's saying, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. He's reaffirming and explaining, this is who I am in my faithfulness to you. You will see that unfold. Here is what my command is of you. This is what I expect your life to look like as you go forward and you go into this land that I am promising to give to you and to your people. And so, just to kind of address a little bit of what's the purpose of the law. He talks about the book of instruction, book of the law, and we talked about how first 5 books of the Old Testament are the Pentateuch. We're actually in Joshua, which is the first book, starting the history books of the genre of the Old Testament. So, what's the significance and what's the importance of the people of Israel as they're supposed to be going in? Is this just kind of rote obedience? Is this something that we're just following God says, and so we do, and this is what obedience looks like? So rather than do a deep theological dive on the law and the big theological overview, I want to recognize just a few things, a few different aspects of what the law is about. First, it's that it's missional. It's interesting to think of it that way. But God's law is reflective of his justice and his wisdom. I really like works by scholars, like Old Testament scholars like Sandra Richter. She's on the NIV translation committee, and she's given lots of talks and done studies on anthropology and studies on the Old Testament ethics, and so particularly how the Old Testament law was protective of women in a context and a society that wasn't. Because we actually have sources from the ancient Near East where we can look at the Code of Hammurabi, we can look at ancient law codes of other civilizations, and although there's some similar structure to Old Testament law and those laws, there's some very radically what would look like upside down ways in which God's kingdom works, how God's ethic works, that gives dignity to all people, even to war captives, even to women who are disenfranchised, to the most disenfranchised people that the people of Israel would encounter or have within their midst. God's law ensures that everyone is taken care of, and in those days, that was not the norm. And oftentimes, that had to do with how you bring people outside of people of Israel in, too. So as people are getting to experience who God is by who the people of Israel are, their ethic that they live by is meant to contrast with the world's values. And in that regard, it's missional. It's also relational. We're invited to it's inviting God's people to know who God is. Just think about how, has anybody ever read through the book of Leviticus? I'm actually very curious to see if anyone has. Okay, a few hands read through the book of Leviticus. There's some weird stuff in there, right? There's some interesting kind of codes as far as purity. You see some regulations, and then it gets to purity, and it gets a little bit gross at times as far as like what cleanliness looks like. I love Sherry's faces. Yeah. It gets kind of weird at times. But interestingly, books like where you see these ideas of what impurity and cleanliness looks like gives us an idea that God is holy, that he is ultimate purity, and we as enfleshed in sinful flesh beings are not holy. We're not clean. We're not pure. It's relational in that it gives us a glimpse into who he is. It builds our theology, so to speak, our knowledge of God's character, his righteousness and justice, same word. And third, I really wish I got missional and relational, and I really wanted another similar rhyming sounding word, and I just couldn't make it work. But the law shows us how unrighteous we are too. Because in the same way that it reveals who God is, it also shows us and his people, this isn't enough. And we see that God has a plan of redemption from the beginning of the fall of mankind. And we see that he's going to be working that as well as he's planning the ultimate redemption of mankind, because he knows that even as, spoiler alert, the people of Israel are going to go into the land that they're inheriting, they're not going to keep to their end of the covenant. Because it's not enough. And so, the people of Israel follow the law to maintain covenant relationship with God as they enter into this new space and as they anticipate ultimate redemption from Yahweh. They follow the law to exist in the land with it and to look different from the rest of the world. And God wants them to know it so well that they have it written on their lips. If you read through a lot of the Psalms in Psalm 119, there's Psalm 119, I wish I could get into the whole kind of character of how it's written, but you see so many descriptions of having God's word as a light unto your feet and a lamp unto your path and all these different words. There's so many other passages in Psalms and throughout the Old Testament where this is the kind of passion that God wants us to, at least it wants his people to be familiar with him, not so that they can be a bunch of empty rule followers, but that they can be living in a way that's different. So all those aspects of how they live God's law is something that they can be living out naturally because they know it and because they love who God is and what he has given them. I think about, just to use kind of a funny example, I think about how this plays out in like our relationships. So I think about like my marriage with Christine, for instance. So Christine's been training me over the last few years. One of the things that, for those of you who have been married for a long time, know this already, but you're merging different lives into one family unit. And so you are two grown adults that you have different plans, that you have different friends, you have lives that merge, friends, and everything like that. We've been married for 5 years, and so that process is pretty, it's getting along. But one of the things that, as we both work and we both have friends outside of Ethnos, or we have things going on with Ethnos, is I've had to learn the hard way. There are times in which if I don't communicate well what I'm planning, or someone says, hey, can you do this? And I say, yeah, that should be fine. It's not always fine. And we've had to learn how to navigate that. And that's been through a lot of bumps and some clumsiness on my part. And so Christine, through the last, even recently, like I said, 5 years, that's still, it's not super long. And so we're moving along there. I just recently was trained to say, let me ask my wife. So when someone asks, like, can we do it Thursday evening? Does that work for you? I would go, maybe I will ask my wife. It starts off very mechanical, and I remember I was talking to someone, and it actually came out that way, very mechanical, because it just was like, play the tape. I'll ask my wife. Because in the beginning, it's something like, okay, I'm still getting this ingrained. Okay, this is a new way that I have to live if I'm in relationship with this person, and obviously this is not a one-to-one comparison, but if I'm in relationship with this person, and this is what it looks like to have a relationship as we're bringing our lives into one, if this matters to me, over time, it's going to be like, okay, I'm like, okay, this is what I need to say in these circumstances. Okay, I got it. And it's going to be a little bit mechanical at first because I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I need to ask Christine first. I'll ask her. To over time, Lord willing, 5 years from now, it's without me even having to think about it. Like, that sounds great. Let me talk to my wife and get back to you. So y'all can keep me accountable if you ask me, like, hey, is this? And I'm like, oh, sure. Like, have you asked your wife? I will ask my wife. will probably be what you get for a little while. But the kind of relationship that God wants with his people is that they know him, they follow him, and they obey him. It's an intimate relationship that he wants with his people, which takes us to this principle, that God's people experience his power and presence when they live for him. God's people experience his power and presence when they live for him. There's obedience involved in this, very clearly in this passage. And part of obedience that we see here isn't just that you're rule following. It's not about your moral formation. You're becoming a better person by following these rules that God wrote in the Bible. Christianity gets a bad rap for that a lot. But the truth is, relationship with God means that we're living for him. And that's what the call is for his people here. Let's go to our next passage here. We'll continue reading on. It's going to be in verse 10. We're just going to read, we're going to skip a little bit. We'll read 10, 11, and then we'll pick back up in 16, and I'll kind of just paraphrase kind of the little blurb that's going on in between there. But in verse 10, chapter 1, it says, Joshua then commanded the officers of Israel, go through the camp and tell the people to get their provisions ready. In 3 days you will cross the Jordan River and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you. And so skipping ahead, basically what happens is he then turns to their 3 tribes. One of them is sort of a half tribe, and they're going to be the ones that are living on the east side of the Jordan. So they're being called upon, as Moses has called upon them, to go west of the Jordan and to help the rest of the nation of Israel go and conquer the land and bring fruition to God's promise to bring the promised land to the people of Israel. And so he turns to these 3 tribes, and he explains, okay, this is what I need you to do. We're going to enter into the land. You're going to come with us. And once we're done, you can go back and you can return east of the Jordan where you can have your rest. And so here's their response to him in verse 16. They answered Joshua, we will do whatever you command us. We will go wherever you send us. We will obey you just as we obeyed Moses. And may Yahweh, your God, be with you as he was with Moses. Anyone who rebels against your orders and does not obey your words and everything you command will be put to death. Be strong and courageous. Hazach vachames. This is an interesting turn here because as we've been seeing those first kind of chunks of Scripture, it's Yahweh who's talking to God and telling him, be strong and courageous. This is what I'm calling you to do. Be strong and courageous. I'm with you. Be strong and courageous. Here's what I'm charging you to do when you're in the land. And so Joshua then turns to the people of Israel, to these 3 tribes in particular, and he talks to them, and they affirm to him, hey, we're here. Yeah, we're along. We've been faithful to Moses. Be faithful to you as well. And they turn to him and they say, be strong and courageous. It's very interesting, and rabbis and scholars have been blown away by how there's not just this sense in which God's telling them, hey, be courageous in who I am. There's this kind of mutual turn to each other too. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Because this isn't just a top-down thing that God is telling them. This is a thing that they're affirming to each other. And that they in turn are affirming back to Joshua. And as Joshua is empowering them to go out, this is a community that's rooted in the power and promise of God's presence. And so they look at each other and they tell each other, be strong and of good courage. And here we see that God's people rely on his power and presence for security. God's people rely on his power and presence for security. It's not about Moses. It's not about Joshua. It's not about any of the leaders, not even the tribe of Levi, the tribe of priests. It's not about any one particular person that's their security. It's not Joshua, even as some commentators will say that you will name, Joshua as the protagonist of this book and everything. God's the protagonist. God's their security. As they're going forward, it's on God's power and presence that they rely on for security. That's why they turn to each other and say, be strong and of good courage. That's why they're able to look at the person who's going to be the agent that God is calling to lead them, be strong and courageous. Because Joshua's not their source of security. I want to take us now to chapter 2. We're not going to read a lot of it. There's a lot of sermons, there's a lot of Bible studies. The story of Rahab is an incredible story for so many reasons. And the biggest ones being the fact that she is an outsider, she's a woman, and she's someone who would have not have been looked fondly upon by the people of Israel. Now, there's maybe some controversy as to why the spies were there in her inn in the first place. But for her, as a prostitute, there's this incredible turn towards Yahweh that she has that we see echoed all the way in the book of Hebrews in 11. Remember the hall of faith, where it talks about by faith this person followed God and trusted. In that line of people that are listed there, Rahab is listed. Just where you would think you would find Joshua in that list, Rahab is there. That's how significant she is. She's also in the lineage of the Messiah. Just think about how incredible that is, to be in the lineage of who God is going to bring about salvation for the world. That's how significant this story is. And as much as it would be great to be able to spend time unpacking it, there's one particular part that I want to highlight. And so we'll read here, beginning in chapter 2, verse 8, where it's a little bit of a comical part of the story because the spies go to her inn, someone finds them out, they out them to the king, they send the authorities, bring them out, and then she kind of comes out and she pulls a Star Wars reference. She kind of pulls a C-3PO, like, oh, they were here, if you run, you can catch them. And she pulls that out and is like I didn't know where they were from and everything, but they left and they went out the city gate. If you run, you can catch them. And they went and they shut the gates for the night, and they were in the clear for the time. And so she goes up on the roof to talk to the two spies, and this is the conversation that they have. In chapter 2, verse 8, it says, before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up on the roof to talk with them. I know Yahweh has given you this land, she told them. We are all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. For we have heard how Yahweh made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For Yahweh, your God, is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. This right here is where I want to make our fourth stop in these two chapters here. Because right here is where we see Rahab acknowledge something that's going on for sure the people of Jericho, but also for the people that are in the land of Canaan. There's going to be some exceptions that we'll see later in the book of Joshua. But you remember how we've been going through kind of our first three stops in chapter 1, where we've been seeing this charge, be strong of good courage, be strong and of good courage. We've seen how that courage is rooted not just in a self-generating kind of way, it's coming from who they have confidence in as their stability. This particular word for courage in Hebrew is different. Not to get too dramatic about this, but interestingly, this particular word oftentimes is in the context of I stand myself up. It's a self-powered kind of strength. There are a lot of contexts in which it's actually used for God when he rises up in different contexts. It can be rendered in the English in that way too. When Yahweh rises up to fight. When so-and-so, when this person rises up, this person stands up on their own. It's a very sort of self-generating strength and courage. No one has the self-generating courage and strength to fight after hearing such things. And it's no wonder that the people outside of God's chosen people, of God's people, that they're missing that source of strength and courage as God's people are coming. Because it's admittedly pretty hard to miss a massive nation of people just on the other side of the River Jordan. They know that they're coming. There's no secret about it. And that this is their time, and that this is their opportunity. Are you going to turn towards God's kingdom? God's people are coming. God is going to deliver this land to his people. What does this mean for you? And we see at the very end of this that for Rahab, she acknowledges that God is the supreme God of heavens above and the earth below. The same exact thing that God told the people of Israel in the passage in Exodus that we saw earlier, where he's naming the Israelites as a kingdom of priests, that he is Lord of all creation. She's acknowledging the same thing right here. And she, as an outsider, as a Canaanite woman in a land that's about to be handed over to the people of Israel, in a way that looks like self-preservation for her and her family, it's actually a turn towards who God is, who he really is. Is it any wonder that her story is so highlighted right here in the midst of what looks like is about to be a story about Joshua? We're reminded right here that this is God's story. This is the work that he's doing. And we're going to get to the Battle of Jericho in chapter 5 in a few weeks. And we're going to see how there was so much opportunity during that time for there to be more Rahabs. And there weren't. And that leads us to this final principle. Oops. Oh, I lost it. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. God's promises, power, and presence are for those who follow him. God's promises, power, and presence are for those who follow him. We've seen through this passage this morning how God is giving a directive to Joshua. He's affirming his promise that he promised to Moses. He's now giving to Joshua and his people. And Joshua's turning around and he's mobilizing the people of Israel. They're getting ready to move in, send a couple spies. And we see that even people who are outsiders, even in the midst of all this, and what looks like it's going to be a story about Joshua and the people of Israel just taking the land, there's people who are coming in and saying, we recognize who Yahweh is, and Yahweh is the supreme God of all creation. God's promises, power, and presence are for those who follow him. Rahab wanted to follow Yahweh. And this is the kind of kingdom impact that the people of Israel were to have as they were residing in this land. And again, spoiler alert, this isn't something that they were able to uphold, which is why you follow the lineage going down from Rahab when you find God's Messiah, who's going to take away the sins of the world. So what does that mean for us? To get back to our question from the beginning, what does it look like for us as a community of God's people to have courage, to be strong and of good courage? As we've run into this phrase in the scriptures, there's other passages in the Old Testament too, as David is telling Solomon, his son, be strong and courageous, the exact same phrase, much later. But what does that look like for us as a community, as a church? Because I don't want to get into comparisons, like direct comparisons of church, Israel. There's a whole theological debate there. But what does it look like for us as God's people, the church grafted in? Because oftentimes when we think about courage, if we're being honest, here in our Western American kind of ideal of what courage is, when we hear it in everyday vernacular, these are the kinds of mental images that at least I get. It's a very, I can conquer, I can do this. Person standing over a cliff triumphantly. I can do this. Be courageous. Almost as if it's this, you can will it to happen, that you can, hey, be courageous. Stay courageous. Lead with courage. That as long as you can speak it into existence. You can show up to work and okay, stay courageous and make it through the day. Here we go. And this is how we, at least growing up for me, tended to apply it. Would see it in kind of Christian, men's be courageous, be strong and courageous. I'd read that and I'd memorize those verses. I had baseball players that I followed that when they'd sign the autograph, it was Joshua 1:9, and that's where I first heard it. And I was like, oh, what a cool Bible verse. And I always had this kind of idea, without realizing it, that this is always what I had in mind. This self-generating sense of, I can do it because God's on my side, because God's got me. The truth is, we're going to find through the rest of the book of Joshua, as we go forward, it's not whose side God is on. It's who is on God's side. So for us as a church community, we find ourselves in a very interesting moment, a very interesting situation in which we ourselves are going through a pretty significant transition. So we're anticipating going to a new location from this one where we've been for decades, where we've been able to see God's kingdom purpose worked in ways in which we've been able to see people get baptized. I've been able to see in just a short time that I've been here on this property, people get baptized, getting to hear stories of legacies. When I got to have the privilege of getting to be here for that reunion that y'all had just a couple of weeks ago, of talking with people there, stories of just different connections and pastors that have been here, and the ways in which just the church is connected with the community over the years, and as Richardson has kind of developed around it, it's been incredible to see. And we're in a moment now where we're going to be moving to a new place. What does that mean for us? And we've talked about fear and anxiety. Pastor Josh, as he's been walking us through this sermon series. But now we find ourselves in a moment of, we're going forward. We're entering into a season of pastoral transition. Me entering into what it looks like to train to be lead pastor. That's new. That's big. Not just for me, for everybody. And the charge that we see here, as God is wanting his kingdom of priests in that day to go and to have an impact on the rest of the world, and not to get comfortable where they are, and to sit and to grow and to find the things that work for them and that make them okay, we're thriving here as long as we've got these things that are up and running, we've got some regularity. That's not the measure of their success. Measure of their success is how they're reflecting who God is by how they value his law and his word and what he's calling them to do by witnessing to all nations. It's not our calling to get comfortable with where we're going. It'll be the leadership's responsibility, mine and Pastor Josh's and the elder board's responsibility to steward our hitting the ground running when we get to our new location. That before we say like, okay, well, let's go ahead and pull the fences in. Here are the ministries that we can do here just for us. And we're like, no, how do we make this outward focused? How do we make sure that this momentum of evangelism, work, invitation to the community, how do we keep that momentum going? It also looks like us helping each other. We step in with, how can I help? Instead of, do you need anything? We've talked about this before. If you've been in life groups with Josh before, that was one of the first things that I had to learn was asking a different question. Instead of, do you need anything? Like, how can I help? What can I do? Because this is a challenging season. It can be exhausting. We also need to lean in. As we support one another, we see as the people of Israel are turning towards each other and they're turning back towards Joshua, and Joshua is commissioning them, who's been commissioned by God, be strong and of good courage. Okay, be strong and of good courage. There's this sense of reciprocal encouragement and here for one another that, y'all, I've been so blown away to experience here at Ethnos. I mean, even as recently as yesterday, getting to watch Christine come home from the baby shower, which I just thank you guys so much for hosting. Just watching her come with boxes, she's like, I need help getting stuff from the car. I'm like, oh my goodness. I just blown away that I've grown up in the church, y'all, and getting to experience the degree to which when we say here that we're here to help each other, it's lived out. I've experienced it more here than anywhere else, and that's not a knock on any other church, but how it's understood and intentionally done here has just been something that's humbled me. It's humbled Christine. And I don't want us to lose that. This could be an exhausting transition if we don't bear it well together. So if you feel overwhelmed, reach out. Just as I was mentioning during the announcements, reach out, talk to leadership. If you're concerned, talk to Pastor Josh, talk to the elders. If you're trying to figure out and navigate, like, I'm stuck and overwhelmed with the things that I've got to organize and move, like, talk to Chris, talk to me. Don't try to do it on your own. We make sure that we transition our leadership well. And I want to be clear. I don't mean any of this, and I hope it's for sure not being taken as self-serving. But we need to see Pastor Josh off well. And we also need to make sure that we're caring for our elders, that we're caring for all of our volunteer leaders, anyone who's in leadership capacity, which is a lot of us, if we're being honest. That's how we take care of each other. The Israelites didn't write off Moses. They were very clear. We followed Moses, we'll follow you. You're the one who's leading us on behalf of, you're the one who's shepherding us, you're the one who's guiding us, calling us forward. How we send Josh off will matter a lot. We also encourage each other. We can say, yeah, be strong and courageous. And we do it not with the kind of fun, and I'm not knocking on anyone if you've got the decor or the cross-stitchings on your pillows. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I love those verses because of what they really mean. And the problem is that we tend to miss it. Because this is more of the picture of what being strong and of good courage looks like as a church family. A little cheesy, I know. At least it's not AI pictures, though. So I tease Josh about that a little bit. But we encourage one another. Our courage and our rest and our security, it's not based on Josh. It's not going to be based on me. God forbid. It's not based on our elder board. Our security has been and will always be based on God himself. That's something that we need to be reminding each other as we go forward. Yes, there's a lot of change. There's a lot going on. I've been in a lot of conversations. There's a lot of changing. I'm like, yeah, there are. I thank God that our courage is not rooted in any one of us, but rooted in who God is. And I can't wait to see how that's practiced out as a church family, because even with a church move, think about what this could look like, y'all. That even with a church that's moving, even with big changes on the horizon, that's going through leadership transition, that we can still be a community where people go to where they live, they work and they play, and they're engaging with non-believers, that each and every one of us engage with people out there, but that even while we are experiencing change and transition, we can still find rest and encouragement when we're together. Imagine what that would be like. And that's my challenge to you. So to you, church family, I say, Chazak v'chametz. Chazak v'chametz. Be strong and of good courage. Let's pray. God, we thank you for all that you are. You're a good God. As simple as it is for me to say that, you're just so good. Thank you that we get to be together here this morning as a church community, that we get to read pages off of a book from so long ago. It's just a far cry from living memory, other than the fact that you are the living author. We get a glimpse in each of these snapshots who you are. We get to see what it is that you value. We see what's important to you. We see that you're holy, that you're perfect. We see that your presence has already been where you've sent your people. We're going to see in future weeks how you told your people even before, at least 400 years before sending Joshua and the people of Israel into the land of Canaan, that you were present in Canaan. You knew all of the junk, the idol worship, sacrifices to false deities, and said, my cup is not yet full for them, because you're long-suffering and you're patient. And you desire a relationship with us. Desire a relationship with those you've created in your image. God, we ask you, as we go forward, as we recognize that this moment that we're in, it's temporary. It's going to pass. The move won't last forever. Leadership transition won't last forever. But everything that we've read today is rooted in the timeless truth of who you are. And we praise you for that. You are the waymaker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. God, that is who you are. For any of us here this morning that just may be wrestling with, what's this going to look like? God, I just ask that you would minister to their hearts, minister to all of us. God, I'm grateful for the opportunity that we get to reflect your light and your love, even as we anticipate a wave of transitions. That our testimony, people who know us and know everything that's going on in our church, people are watching. And they'll want to see how we respond. God, may we be a community that's rooted in you. May we be a community that has its courage, its strength, its resilience. Planted on your solid foundation, not anybody else's. Thank you for giving us this community that we all have to be able to steward. I thank you so much for all that you are, God. I praise you. I thank you for your love, your grace, your mercy, your justice, your truth, your care. And we cast all our cares upon you this morning as we go forward into the week. Just ask that you would be with us. We love you and pray these things in the name of your Son, Jesus, and by the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. We're going to dismiss to coffee break. We'll continue to pray for Josh as he's traveling. See you